Welcome to Pillowtime lore, where dreams take shape and stories wrap around you like your favorite blanket. You've made it through the day, and now it's time to slow down, breathe deeply, and drift into a world made just for you. So, fluff up your pillow, snuggle into your coziest spot, and let your eyes get heavier with each word. This is your moment. No to-do lists, no noise, just stillness and a little magic. With each breath in, feel the tension melt from your shoulders. With each breath out, let go of everything that doesn't serve your peace. You're safe here. Tonight's story is soft and soothing, like a warm cup of tea for your thoughts, carefully crafted to calm your busy mind and help you drift gently into sleep. So close your eyes, dear dreamer. Let your imagination wander while I carry you into a land where anything is possible and everything ends in peace. This is Pillowtime lore. The morning light streamed through the large front window of the bakery, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Outside, the city was alive with the sound of cars and the shouts of people starting their day. But inside, there was a different kind of life. The slow, gentle rhythm of bread. Lena's hands, dusted with flour, moved with a familiar grace, kneading the dough she had made 100 times. The warm, comforting smell of yeast and sugar was the air she breathed. This was her world, a small, warm bubble in the middle of a big, bustling city. The bakery had been her grandmother, Esther's life, and now it was Lena's. Esther, a stern but loving woman with a laugh that sounded like rustling leaves, had taught Lena everything she knew. Every loaf of sourdough, every delicate pastry, held a part of her grandmother's memory. The bakery wasn't just a shop, it was their home. A place of shared stories and quiet comfort. But 3 months had passed since Esther was gone, and the bakery felt a little less warm. The quiet of the mornings, once a peaceful time for baking, now felt heavy and empty. Lena found herself listening for a voice that wouldn't come. A familiar hum from the back room that was now silent. The house, which was right above the bakery, felt vast and unfamiliar without her grandmother's presence. Lena felt a deep sense of loss, and the rhythm of her life, once a steady comfort, now felt a little lonely. It was a sadness that she carried in her heart and in the quiet of her home. The quietness of the house, which had been a sad and empty feeling, finally drove Lena to the attic. It was a place she had avoided, a dusty, forgotten world filled with the quiet shadows of her grandmother's past. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and forgotten things. Lena began to sort through the boxes, each one a small memory box of a life she barely knew. She found an old dress, a beautiful thing of pale blue silk, and a photograph of her grandmother, young and smiling. On a beach, she came to a small wooden chest filled with old books. Most of them were cookbooks, a familiar comfort. But at the bottom of the chest, tucked away and almost hidden, was a book she had never seen before. It was a worn, leather-bound journal. Its soft leather, a beautiful, faded color. On the front, there were no words, but Lena knew the handwriting on the inside pages was her grandmother's. It was a perfect, flowing handwriting, a beautiful, steady hand she had loved since she was a child. The journal wasn't a diary. It felt like something more, with a quiet curiosity. Lena opened the journal to the last page. There, tucked inside, was a small, delicate key. It was not a new, shiny key, but an old one made of dark, rusted iron. It was a key to a secret, a key to a life her grandmother had kept hidden. Lena held the journal and the small key in her hands, and the feeling of sadness was replaced by a new, powerful feeling, the feeling of a secret waiting to be told. The quiet of the house was no longer just sad. It was full of a beautiful mystery. After everyone had gone home and the bakery was filled with a warm, quiet silence, Lena finally sat down to read the journal. The only light in the room came from a single lamp, its soft glow falling on the worn leather pages. The bakery, once a place of comfort and routine, now felt like a silent witness to a story she was just beginning to understand. The journal wasn't a book of daily events. It was a story, written with a quiet, careful heart. Her grandmother's perfect handwriting told of a long-held secret, a life she had lived before Lena was born. It was a story of a secret love, a man who worked on the other side of the city, a love that was not allowed by the family, but the love was real, and it had led to a secret child, a daughter, a aunt that Lena never knew she had. The name of the girl was Clara. She was her grandmother's first child, a beautiful, quiet secret that had been kept for a lifetime. Lena felt a deep shock as she read the words, a feeling that her world, a world she thought she knew, was a fragile, quiet lie. The loneliness she had felt after her grandmother's death was now mixed with a new, complex sadness for a life her grandmother had to hide. She read with a growing sense of wonder, her heart aching for her grandmother's quiet pain. Clara wasn't just a character in a story. She was a real person, a part of her family that had been lost for a lifetime. Lena looked at the key, its small, delicate shape now holding a weight and a meaning she had never imagined. The last pages of the journal were not filled with sadness, but with a quiet, beautiful hope. Lena, with a heart that was now full of new, complex emotions, turned the final page. Her grandmother's handwriting, so perfect and steady, told of a beautiful gift she had made for Clara. It was a hand-painted teacup with a small, cheerful yellow bird on the side, a way for Clara to always feel close to her mother. The journal also spoke of Clara's childhood dream of owning a small flower shop, a place where she could be surrounded by the beautiful colors and quiet life of the flowers she loved. These were not just stories. They were clues. They were beautiful, honest clues to a life that was still out there. Lena sat in the quiet of her bakery, holding the journal in her hands, her heart beating with a new, strange rhythm, the secret of her grandmother's. Life had been a sadness, but the final pages were a message of hope, a message that Clara was not lost forever, but was a living, breathing person with a teacup and a dream. Lena felt a powerful, undeniable pull. Her grief for her grandmother was now mixed with a new, quiet purpose. She had to find Clara. She had to find the teacup with the small yellow bird and the flower shop Clara had always dreamed of owning. The key, which had been a key to a secret, was now a key to a life. Lena's world, once so small and filled with the rhythm of her bakery, had just become a new, bigger world. A world filled with a beautiful secret and a new, powerful mission. Lena felt a deep sense of duty. Her hands, so used to kneading dough, now held the secret of her grandmother's past. She had to find Clara. The secret was too big, too old, and too beautiful to be left in a dusty journal. Her search began as a quiet act, a secret she carried in her heart. She couldn't tell her family. She didn't know how they would react, so she began her quest alone, her heart filled with a new, quiet purpose. She would leave the bakery in the middle of the afternoon, the warm smell of bread, a comforting memory behind her. She walked through the old city neighborhood, a place filled with the sounds of life, but she felt a quiet distance from it all. She visited old bookshops with their dusty shelves, small cafes with their warm lights, and antique stores filled with a lifetime of forgotten things. She wasn't just looking for an object. She was looking for a sign, a beautiful clue. The teacup with the small, yellow bird was her one true guide. She would spend hours in antique shops, her eyes scanning the shelves, hoping to see the small, cheerful bird. Her search was a secret, but it gave her a new rhythm to her life, a feeling that she was doing something important. She found nothing. The teacup with the yellow bird seemed to be a ghost, a beautiful memory that had faded with time. The days turned into weeks, and Lena began to feel a quiet sense of fear. The secret was a beautiful thing, but it was also a very hard thing to find. She knew she couldn't give up. The teacup was out there somewhere, a beautiful clue waiting for her to find it. Lena's quiet search through the antique stores and cafes had led her to a dead end. The teacup with the yellow bird seemed to be a beautiful ghost, a memory that had been lost to time. Her heart, which had been so full of purpose, began to feel a quiet ache of frustration. She knew she couldn't do it alone. The secret was too big, too old, and she needed a keeper of old memories. Her search, which had been a quiet, lonely thing, now led her to Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable's small grocery store was a place of comfort, filled with the smell of fresh bread and old cheese. Mrs. Gable, an old, wise woman with a kind face, had been a friend of her grandmother for a lifetime. Lena, with a careful heart, sat down with her after the last customer had left. Mrs. Gable, Lena began, her voice soft and a little shaky. I'm looking for an old teacup. It has a small yellow bird painted on it. Mrs. Gable didn't say a word. She just looked at Lena with a quiet, knowing look in her eyes. It was a look that told Lena she knew a story that was a beautiful, old secret. Mrs. Gable didn't talk about a teacup. Instead, she talked about Esther's old sadness, a quiet time in her life when she was young. She talked about a child who had a love for flowers, a child who had to be sent away a long time ago. Lena felt a deep sense of relief. She was not alone. The story from the journal was real. The teacup was a clue, but the love of flowers was a new, powerful clue, a more beautiful, more personal clue that led to a new part of the city. Lena thanked Mrs. Gable, her heart filled with a new hope. She was no longer just a baker looking for a teacup. She was a woman looking for her family. Mrs. Gable's quiet words were a new piece of the puzzle, a beautiful, powerful clue that changed everything. Lena realized that Clara had not just been sent away. She had been sent to a different part of the city. The teacup was a clue, but the love of flowers was a key that could unlock a whole new world. Lena, with a deep sense of purpose, went back to her bakery. She told her friend, the grocer from across the street, that she had to leave for a while. She left her warm bakery in the care of her friend, a part of her life that had been so safe and so sure. She took the journal and the small rusted key, her only guides, in a world she was just beginning to understand. She took a long bus ride to a part of the city she had never been to before. The city changed as the bus moved. The familiar streets and shops of her neighborhood giving way to a new world of different buildings and unfamiliar faces. She looked out the window, her heart a mix of fear and excitement. She was no longer just a baker, a keeper of a small, warm shop. She was a keeper of her family's truth, a quiet person on a new, important journey, the journal. Heavy in her hands, felt like a compass, guiding her through a landscape of old secrets. The bus came to a stop, and Lena stepped out into a part of the city that felt both new and old. The streets were filled with a different rhythm, a different kind of life. She had left her home, her comfort, and her rhythm, and she had a feeling that her life, like the city, was about to change in a beautiful and unexpected way. Lena stepped off the bus and into a different world. The sounds of her home neighborhood were gone, replaced by a new, gentle rhythm of different voices and different bells. She felt a nervous excitement, a feeling that she was very close to something important. She began to walk, not with a hurried pace, but with a quiet, careful heart. She wasn't just looking for a person. She was looking for a feeling that would tell her she was on the right path. She walked for a long time, her eyes scanning the new streets, looking for a sign from her grandmother's journal. She passed small, friendly shops and quiet cafes, but her heart was still and quiet, and then she saw it, tucked away on a quiet street corner, with its front window filled with the most beautiful flowers she had ever seen, was a small, beautiful flower shop. The air was filled with the sweet, gentle smell of roses and fresh green leaves, and Lena knew in her heart that this was the place. She walked closer, her heart beating with a new, powerful rhythm. In the window, on a small wooden table, sat a teacup. It was old and beautiful, with a small, cheerful yellow bird painted on its side. It was the teacup from her grandmother's journal, the beautiful, quiet clue that had led her on this long journey. The teacup, a symbol of a love and a life that had been kept a secret for so long, was now here, a warm, beautiful sign that her search was over. Lena felt a wave of emotions, relief, shock, and a quiet, powerful joy. She knew that the woman who owned this shop, the woman who loved flowers, was Clara. The journey across the city had ended, but a new, more important journey was about to begin. Lena's heart beat with a nervous excitement as she opened the door to the flower shop. A small bell chimed a gentle, welcoming sound. The air was warm and filled with the sweet smell of flowers. An elderly woman, her hands moving with a gentle grace as she arranged a bouquet of roses, looked up. Her face held both kindness and a deep sadness. A life of quiet longing etched into her eyes. Lena knew instantly that this was Clara. "Clara," Lena said, her voice soft and shaky. The woman looked up, her eyes wide with shock, a look of pure surprise that sent a shiver through Lena. Clara's name had not been spoken by anyone in a long, long time. Lena, with no plan, only the truth in her heart, took a deep breath. She reached into her bag and took out the worn, leather-bound journal and the small, rusted key. "This was my grandmother's," Lena said, her voice a little stronger now. She wrote a story in it, a story about a secret love, a dream of a flower shop, and a hand-painted teacup. A story about you. Clara didn't say a word. Tears, a lifetime of sadness and longing, began to fill her eyes. Lena held out the journal, and Clara, with hands that were shaking, took it. She saw her mother's perfect handwriting, a memory so clear and so painful, and she knew the truth. Lena didn't have to say anything else. The journal, a voice from the past, had spoken for her. The secret, a burden they had both carried for a lifetime, was now out in the open, and in its place was a new, beautiful, and honest truth. The climax of their story was not a fight, but a quiet, emotional truth. Clara did not get angry. She began to cry, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of a lifetime of quiet loneliness, finally finding a home. She looked at the journal, at the perfect handwriting of her mother, and she knew the truth. She looked at the small key, and she felt a part of her heart, a part that had always been locked, finally begin to open. Lena did not say a word. She just sat with Clara, letting her feel the beautiful, overwhelming truth of her mother's love. The hidden journal had not just held a secret, it had held the honest truth of their family, a truth that, when found, brought with it a new kind of peace. Lena and Clara did not just find each other. They found a new kind of family, a new kind of home. They talked for a long time, sharing stories of a grandmother Lena had known, and a mother Clara had only been a part of in a beautiful, quiet memory. Lena told her of the bakery, of the warm rhythm of the dough, and Clara told her of the flower shop, of the quiet beauty of the flowers. They were two women from two different parts of the city, but they were bound together by a beautiful, quiet secret that had finally come to light. The hidden journal, with its beautiful story and its small, rusted key, had not just been a secret. It had been a gift. It was a gift that had brought two people together, a gift that had healed a lifetime of quiet sadness. The truth had not torn their family apart. It had made a new one. The baker and the florist had found their way to each other, not through a loud, public reunion, but through a quiet, honest truth that had been kept in a beautiful, old book.